There are some undeniable facts about human life. We are all born. We live in bodies that are imperfect. We get sick. We get injured. And someday, we die. But there is another amazing tie that binds us all together. We care about one another. We celebrate births. We tend to one another when we are sick or injured. We grieve over the passing of those we love. This is Min Central Currents. I'm your host, Teresa Meese. In the midst of all these life events, we still need food. We need shelter. So, we need to work and earn money. But how do we find the balance of needing to work to survive and needing to be present for ourselves and our loved ones through all the seasons of life? The first person we'll be hearing from today is me. Before I begin, I want to ask that you think of a number while listening to these next two personal accounts. That number is 16%. According to the Bureau of Labor and Statistics, only 16% of the private industry workforce, 16%, has access to paid family leave. As for unpaid family leave, that is available to 88% of the workforce. But it leaves those workers making impossible choices. They still have to weigh keeping a roof over their heads and food on the table against caring for a newborn child, taking time to address their own medical needs, or caring for a sick or dying loved one. Normally, I will not be sharing my personal stories on this podcast, but as a member of this community and as a family whose work has long been in the trades, our family's story would be very relatable to many of our listeners. And if it isn't, then hopefully it's eye-opening for you. On Mother's Day of 2007, I got to tell my parents that they were going to be grandparents. My husband and I had been married for nearly 2 years. We owned a home in Painesville and ran a small custom cabinetry business together. Things were looking really good. But by that summer, the tremors foretelling the housing bubble and Great Recession began. Folks weren't getting home equity loans anymore, which meant they weren't remodeling kitchens and bathrooms, which meant work dried up. I already had a second job working remotely from home, but it wasn't enough income to sustain us. By the fall, we had shuttered the cabinet shop, and my partner had found seasonal work. When that work was affected by the shift in the economy, he had to find yet another job, which he started in December, the month before our baby was due. Our first child arrived by unplanned cesarean at 12:15 a.m. on January 1st. She made it into the newspaper as the first baby of 2008. 3 days after we were discharged from the hospital, my husband returned to work. I found myself at home alone with a newborn, recovering from an unplanned abdominal surgery. My husband, who wanted nothing more than to be present, caring for both his wife and his newborn daughter, wasn't able to be with us. He hadn't been at his job long enough to accrue time off, and was told that if he didn't show up for work that Monday, he wouldn't have a job. Nearly 3 years later, when our second child was born, we had been through a big upheaval with the Great Recession. We now ran a handyman service and had saved up enough money so my husband could be at home with us for at least 2 weeks after the birth. And then 2 days before my due date, our work truck was broken into and most of our handyman tools were stolen. The insurance company was only willing to pay us $1,800 for replacing all of those tools, and suddenly we needed to use our savings to purchase the tools that kept food on our table. Our son was born on a Friday. On Saturday, my husband woke up in the hospital room with us with a stomach bug. Not wanting to get our new baby sick, he didn't hold him while he was ill. On Sunday, we were discharged, and I drove my newborn child and seriously ill husband home from the hospital. Our neighbors had been kind enough to watch our little girl while we were at the hospital, and my mom was able to drive down and help me get settled that day. On Monday, my husband started to feel better. On Tuesday, someone called for work, and he took the job. 9 months of planning and saving for this very important point in our lives was taken from us in a single night. Our son's first shopping trip out of the house was to a tool store to start replacing what had been stolen. We will never be able to replace the time that was stolen. We had planned. We had saved. But sometimes things come at you at the worst possible time. We made it work. Our family is close and resilient. But the stress and depression and loneliness that comes from surviving hard situations over and over again is a wholly unnecessary burden that we put on a certain segment of our society. We shouldn't demand eternal resiliency of some simply because their skill set falls in a career field that doesn't come with perks.
Me and her met at an apartment building back in 2013. 2014, we got married.
I recently spoke with Arnie Burzynski about his wife and the love of his life, Yvonne.
She never was married before. She never had any kids. She was in some bad relationships with some guys, throughout the years. She kept a lot of memoirs and stuff. She wrote a book in 2015. I wrote a book in 2013. And, we got married at 50. Both of us were 59. We're both 1955 babies. He was a Christian, born-again Christian. In 92, she tried to kill herself, and she became a born-again Christian, and she spent 2 hours a day in the office doing Bible studies. We joined a Baptist church in 2017. We got baptized, and she was a love of my life. The book she wrote is What It Takes to Find Your True Love. After me seeing her every day for the first 3 months, I gave her a note saying, I need you to write down 10 things what you need out of a man, and I'll write down 10 things what I need out of a woman. And 90% of the stuff matched, so we ended up getting married, and we had a wonderful 5 years together.
Hi, Arnie. It's Teresa again.
Sorry about that.
Oh, gosh. Absolutely no need to apologize. This is life. This is a big deal, and it's okay to have a moment when you're talking about something like losing a spouse. It's perfectly okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. It's still kind of hard for me to deal with it, but I'm getting through,
Do you feel like you can go through the story one more time?
Yep. I think I can do it now.
Okay.
All
right.
Just let me know when you're ready.
All right. I'm ready.
Hi, my name is Arnie Burzynski, and I'm a Vietnam vet and a resident of St. Cloud, Minnesota. My wife was admitted to the nursing home in December 2018. 1 week later, she was admitted to the St. Cloud Hospital on December 15th. And after that, 30 days later, they told me she has only 1 week left to live. She got admitted to hospice care, and 7 days later, she died at 10:30, January 29th, 15 minutes before I got to the hospital. And now I wish I would have had the last 7 days off of work to spend time with her in her last days of her life. I was going to the hospital twice a day the last week of her life. After my wife's funeral, I was shell-shocked that my wife was gone. I could have used 7 days to grieve for her. Thank you.
I want to take a moment to thank Arnie from the bottom of my heart for sharing Yvonne with all of us. My next guest is joining us to discuss a possible solution that is currently before the Minnesota State Legislature.
My name is Bethany Winkles. I'm the Executive Director of the Minnesota AFL-CIO, which is the American Federation of Labor and Congress of Industrial Organizations. We are the largest labor body in the state, representing workers from all walks of life. And we are one of the 3 co-chair organizations for the Minnesotans for Paid Family Medical Leave, along with Children's Defense Fund and Isaiah, Minnesota.
Well, thank you so much, Bethany, for joining me today. I would like to start out by asking what, if any, current system of paid family medical leave exists in the country or the state.
It is a net full of massive holes. And as a country, we should be embarrassed to be considered the only country that doesn't offer parental leave, mandate paid parental leave, with a quote unquote modern economy. And as a state, we are pushing to be among some of the leaders to help undergird and support this network that we need, the system that we need to allow for people to address their basic needs as a family and their basic needs as caregivers. In the nation right now, we've got 9 states who have some version of a paid family leave, paid family medical leave bill, and all of those look different based on the state. The District of Columbia also has a program. The unfortunate reality is that in Minnesota, if you're lucky enough to be offered paid family medical leave, you might be doing okay. But even then, we've heard stories of, folks who had the ability to take leave, some paid leave, and then cobble together what they needed, for example, for the birth of a new child. And one woman who went back to work just a couple months after her child had been born found out that her mother had a terminal diagnosis, and she was the caregiver. She was trying to be able to take time. She wasn't able to access any time. She'd used up all of her quote unquote time for the year, which had been not expansive, and she wasn't able to spend all of the time she needed with her mother as she was dying, because she needed to hold down her job to make sure that her new child, that she had insurance. I mean, we're putting people in these impossible situations and pretending that everything's fine, right? But it's not. And the idea that people can just make it work is a false choice. We live in a society where a lot of the communal bonds and a lot of the spaces where we might have found support before, they're not as strong as they once were. And that's just the way that we're looking at things, right? Less people are part of a faith community. Less people are part of a union. Less people are living in the same community as their extended family. And so people have less and less and less options for support, while we're being asked to take on more and more and more.
A lot of the time, the narrative around this sort of leave is for expectant parents, but the bill that's before Minnesota right now goes beyond that, right?
So the paid family element is regarding the birth of a new child. It's regarding taking care of an aging parent. It's regarding taking care of a sick spouse. It could be a sick child. And it is a program that would allow for people who are in those situations and needing to be caregivers in those situations to take paid time off with partial wage replacement, with the protection of their job and the ability to address that massive need. We know that so many folks don't have access to it. And for a lot of folks, the best version of it is FMLA, which is the national program that allows for unpaid leave, but only if you work for a company of a certain size and only under certain situations. And that's not enough, right? Folks know that the rent is still due. And sometimes when we're dealing with, for example, an aging or ill partner, spouse, family member that's a parent, maybe they've lost an income and now you're even more strapped for cash. The medical leave element of this is about caring for yourself. So if you are someone who broke a leg and isn't able to work, you would be able to use this as partial wage replacement, depending on your salary again, so that you can heal, so that you can take care of yourself, so that you, again, are able to focus on what's important, getting back to health, without putting yourself in a position where you can't hold down what you need to hold your home, or lose your car, or all of the other things that could end up spelling catastrophe for a family. They overlap to some degree. If you are a pregnant parent who, for example, has to go on bed rest, you would be able to access the medical leave in the weeks in the run-up to the birth, and you would also be able to access the paid family leave for the new child bonding. And both are real things. Both need to happen. You shouldn't want to pit one against the other. And it's important that we have a program that acknowledges that both of those things need to be taken care of.
Is there any protection for job retention if you have a situation that falls under the umbrella of the paid family medical leave plan?
So it depends. It depends on what the situation is. There are different job protections depending on, so for example, pregnancy is, discrimination of pregnant bodies is illegal. However, discrimination against some elements of medical leave, it's, but you got to use up your sick time. Oh, well, your sick time's gone. Now you got to use up your vacation. Well, you haven't been able to do that. And some of these things drag out. People make the mistake of saying, well, I can get back to work because they feel such pressure. Then they have a relapse.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden you're in a situation where you've run out of all of your options. You are now on paper as being, in and out of the office. And well, she was able to work for a bit there, or she wasn't able to work for a bit there. And there isn't the protection that's needed. And there also isn't just the preventative and positive oriented space to heal and to take care of yourself. If we want to get people to have more productive and healthy lives, that means being able to go to the doctor. That means being able to, when the doctor says, go home for 6 weeks, to go home for 6 weeks. And currently, people don't have any kind of a safety net in a lot of circumstances where that's actually possible. So they push themselves and they end up either back in the hospital or in bed in a worse way. And then a whole new litany of problems crops up.
How would this plan change access to these sorts of programs for small businesses?
So FMLA is what I referenced, and that is a national program, the Family Medical Leave Act, and that was passed in 1993. And it allows for folks to take time, but it's unpaid time. And it's for certain qualified medical and family reasons. And you can only take that if you're only protected about taking that if you work for a certain size company. So if you work for a small business, the likelihood is you are not protected under FMLA. And the question that you asked about what is actually happening or what needs to happen so that folks who are working for small businesses could have access to something like this, we need a more thoughtful program. And that's really what the legislation we're talking about would do. It's modeled after the UI system, the unemployment insurance system here in Minnesota. It is meant to be both worker and employer contributed, and it's meant to allow for folks to have a program that funds itself, similar to UI, that when they need to access it, they can and is funded. And when folks find themselves in these emergent situations, they're not worrying about what that means for their next paycheck. Now, the big thing about small businesses here is that they could opt into this program. And we'd love to include them at every size, right? Because it is so important that small businesses are able to compete for talent with corporations and large businesses. Many corporations are able to, because they're much larger, offer some version of paid family leave. Not all do, but many can. And for a small business, if you've only got 3 employees, it makes it very cost prohibitive to be paying for a full-time salary on top of a leave salary. So you're covering the person who's gone and you're covering the person who's coming in. This program allows you to pay a small amount on payroll. And that way, when the person goes on leave, they are also able to access this benefit, just like UI, right? You put in for it, you're able to get it. And then the business owner can take what they would be paying in salary and hire a short-term employee if needed to cover that gap.
So having been myself a sole proprietor at one point in time, I am very curious to know if this is a plan that would cover sole proprietors as well. Yes. The way the legislation is written, everyone could access this, which is
wow. Huge, right? I mean, everyone should have the ability to be part of. The whole idea is that if we are all creating something large, then we can all be able to access it when we need to, because the pool is available as needed. And we're continually replenishing it by both employees and employers contributing as they go. And we're not talking about huge contributions, right? We're talking about less than $2 a week.
Hi, this is Teresa, interrupting my own interview because I feel like this point actually needs a little bit more light shown on it. Bethany did just in fact say that the employer and employee would both contribute roughly $2 a week to sustain this program. That is 0.31% per paycheck from both employer and employee. Let's get you back to that interview.
And we would see a program that would allow for 12 weeks of paid time off, making sure that folks can access time with their families, time with their loved ones. It's also really important to note that for a lot of low-wage workers, they don't have this benefit. And even in states, unfortunately, sometimes where they do, if it's only partial wage replacement, they can't use it, right? 50% of poverty wages is not even an amount. I mean, I don't even know what to call that. It's just pathetic. And so we need to make sure, and our program does make sure, that the folks who are on the lowest end of the wage actually are getting close to 100% wage reimbursement as possible. And in the bill right now, we have that going up to 90%.
So you mentioned that this is modeled after the Minnesota unemployment insurance system. Can you tell a little bit more about why that is?
One of the things that we also know is that when it comes to implementing something like this, it needs to be really simple. It needs to be understandable. We need to minimize the administrative responsibilities of both small business owners, large businesses, and make it something that's really actually accessible. And that's why modeling it off of something like UI as a state program makes so much sense. It's something where you can have a base hub. It's coordinated. People can get the answers they need. People can get the support that they need. And you don't have to worry that an HR company from one to another is going to have a misinterpretation. When we're talking about rolling out programs like this, it is a good idea sometimes that they are large government programs. It is a good idea that they're able to be coordinated from a central space. And I would just come back to the idea of unemployment insurance. Unemployment insurance wouldn't make sense to have organized by each company and to have a patchwork of slightly different unemployment insurance rollouts based on which corporation or which small business you worked for. And it's very similar with paid semi-medical leave. Having a program that is comprehensive as a state, that's simple to understand, that's inclusive to all people, That's what we're looking for. And that's really what the legislation that we're supporting has built.
Can you speak more to the length of the leave time that's in this bill?
Different advocates at the Capitol on behalf of businesses saying, well, folks have access to leave when they're talking about having 5 sick days a year. That's not paid family leave. That doesn't allow for meaningful interaction and support and time with family members, either new children or aging and dying grandparents, right? Either side of that, 5 days is not meaningful. The 12-week program with partial wage replacement is really what we would say should be the baseline. And then if folks want to build off of that, they would be in good company, right? We know that there are some European companies that mandate years of paid family leave.
Hey, it's me again, your interrupting host. This actually is a point that I wanted to mention a little bit more information on as well, to put all of this in context for you for where the United States stands on the global stage. Based on data compiled by the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, as current as April of 2018, America ranks 41st out of 41 countries with similar economic status. The United States mandates 0 weeks of paid leave for new parents, whereas right above us on that list is Ireland, that mandates 2 months of paid leave for new parents. All right, I think I'm done interrupting for this episode. I just like people to have data and facts when available. And all the links to this information will be available in our show notes, so you can check them out yourself. Here's Bethany.
We think that there's some really good elements of that. We don't need to, we want to start with 12 weeks, but the idea that 12 weeks is somehow too generous, it just isn't, it doesn't hold water. And we know that because we see what these outcomes are, and we see what child poverty rates, we see, all kinds of things where we see better outcomes when leave is available, when attachment is focused on, when folks have time together to deal with these huge important moments in life and to take care of themselves when it comes to the medical leave.
Do you have any figures on how popular this sort of leave plan is?
The National Partnership for Women and Families regularly polls on this. And in the nation, 84% of U.S. voters support a national paid family and medical leave policy that covers all working people to care for a new child, a seriously ill, injured, or disabled loved one, or their own health issue. 84% nationwide. And here in Minnesota, we know that the numbers are similar, if not higher. So it's a problem that deserves a solution. It deserves our legislators standing up and saying, here's how we can meet the need of what folks are facing. And here's how we can come together and offer solutions for all of us. That's what government can be. It can be the place where we make sure that our communities have what they need. And right now, folks don't.
For folks who are listening to this and who are interested in helping the Paid Family Medical Leave Act make it through the legislature in Minnesota, what do they need to know about its progress so far?
I would just say, as much as we wish these arguments around policy and what's best for our families didn't boil down to partisanship, what's happening at the Capitol right now is pure partisan politics. The Senate Republicans, who are responsible and have leadership in that chamber and have a slim majority, won't even have this bill heard in the Labor Committee. They aren't offering solutions. They aren't acknowledging that this is a real problem. They're still saying things like the market will solve it, and the market isn't solving it. People are just being forced to make impossible decisions where they either don't spend the time they should with children, with sick and aging and dying family members. They don't take the time they should to take care of themselves, and it comes back to harm them with slow recovery and ongoing pain and ongoing hospital visits. So the status quo is not okay. And the Democrats have heard our bill. They're supporting our bill. We're moving it through the House. We have support from the governor. And we're not even getting a counterproposal from the Senate Republicans. So it's pretty frustrating. It's pretty frustrating to be told that an issue that we know is an issue for every family in our state, regardless of political affiliation, isn't being addressed in any way by the majority party in the Senate. So I'd really ask folks, right, to reach out to Paul Gazelka, the Senate Majority Leader. He's from Brainerd. If folks in the in the central part of our state who are hearing this are from the Brainerd area, pick up the phone, give him a call, let him know that at a minimum, you want to know what he thinks the answer is, because nothing isn't an answer.
If you're interested in learning more about the Minnesota Paid Family Medical Leave Bill that's working its way through the legislature right now, the bill number is HF 1200. We'll link to it in the show notes. I'd like to once again thank Arnie Burzynski for sharing his story with us today. This episode was developed and managed by Jane Conrad. Production by me, Teresa Meese. Music provided by Epidemic Sound. Contact us with your questions, comments, and show ideas at MinCentralCurrents, that's MINN, Central Currents with an S, @gmail.com. You can find us at MinCentral Currents on your favorite podcast app. And remember, click subscribe. Till next week.